Welcome to the Mayor's Update for February 2016. I'm Megan Pembroke, Communications Director for the City of Everett. Each month we sit down with Mayor Ray Stephanson to talk about issues and projects that are important to you. Mayor, welcome to our first Mayor's Update for 2016.
Yeah, thank you. Gosh, 2016. Where'd last year go? It's hard to believe, but Happy New Year.
Thank you. Yeah. And speaking of time, this last month you gave your 13th State of the City annual address at Xfinity Arena.
Lucky 13.
Lucky 13. And, you know, you talked a little bit in your remarks about some of the constants you've seen during your time in office and also some of the changes, some of the surprises along the way. Can you talk a little bit about what's changed, what's the same since you took office?
Well, you know, I think that the constants with any business, probably with any household, are, you know, finances first. It's what can you afford to do, what level of service are you able to provide, and you know, it's an issue, Megan, that as you know, we talk about daily. There's something in the business day about a department or a need or a challenge. So that hasn't changed. Clearly, the recession, which, you know, for us it lasted a good 6 years, starting in 2008. In fact, our 2016 budget, for really the first time we've seen revenue match what it was prior to the recession in 2008. So that's a long time to see a recovery getting back to revenue. So, you know, we've done a lot of things in terms of balancing that budget. I think we pay our financial obligations, and we've built reserves for difficult economic times, and we increased our fees last year to really reflect the cost of doing business. We had to make some adjustments, and we've downsized. I mean, and fortunately, we've been able to do it through primarily attrition, which is through vacancies, which is always the best way to do it. But we've become a leaner city, and we're asking more of our citizens all the time, and so many of them volunteer, which really makes our ability to deliver services so unique. Our employees are asked to do more. I mean, it's anyone who thinks, you know, public employees sort of come to work at 9 and go home at 4:30 should see our employees, because it's long days and nights and sometimes weekends. So it's a big deal. So those are sort of the constants. You know, it's just sort of the day-to-day things. The challenges are different. You know, in 2005 we were under the threat of a base realignment and closure, and initially Everett Station, the Naval Station, was on the closure list. We fought hard to keep the base open, and for really the last 10 years we've worked hard with the Navy to ensure that the Pentagon understands the military and strategic value of that base. And so that was sort of a highlight. 777X was a big deal. As you remember, the governor asked me to do the permitting task force for all state and federal agencies. That was a great success. And then, of course, landing the 777X was a huge success. Those are sort of the, you know, a couple examples of sort of the big things that, in addition to the other things that we do 12 hours a day. So those have been sort of the constants. But I think we really are turning our attention to more and more quality of life issues, and you've been a big part of the Streets Initiative as well.
And you talked a little bit about this, but in terms of Everett's economy, the Navy and aerospace have really been constants, not always givens, but constants.
Right.
But you talked in your remarks about some of the emerging opportunities in maritime and healthcare. Can you talk a little bit about what you see in 2016 in those areas?
Absolutely. I guess the first thing I would say, we are blessed to have an incredible employer like Boeing and Everett City Limits. You know, 94% of all airplanes that were delivered in 2015 were built in Washington State. That's a pretty remarkable record, and Boeing's had record years for sales and deliveries of airplanes, and we benefit obviously from that. But you can never take that for granted, and I've learned you can't take the Navy, our second largest employer, for granted. So we've been very intentionally looking and focusing on how do we diversify this economy. We have a rich history of maritime. We have a great port of Everett. They're seeing ships come to a port at a record they haven't seen since 2000. So it's really increasing in terms of activity, and a lot of that's aerospace. In fact, the port's making more investment so they can handle bigger and more ships on the waterfront. But I believe that our future lies in shipbuilding, ship repair. It's a well-known fact that the West Coast commercial fishing fleet needs to be rebuilt. I think we're in a perfect position through our history and our culture to be a big part of that. Navy needs maintenance facilities. We could be a big part of that. The state ferry system is one where there's not a lot of competition. I think having an additional vendor that could build state ferries, as taxpayers, we would all benefit. So as I think of particularly that Kimberly-Clark property and the loss of jobs, and I ran into somebody the other day that their spouse had passed on, and he had worked at Kimberly-Clark for years, and she said he was just absolutely devastated when that mill closed in 2012, and it affected some 700 families. And so I think to do anything less than try to recreate good family wage jobs and maritime jobs would be a terrific addition to that side into our community. And then the emergence of healthcare in our community with a $500 million investment of Providence Hospital several years ago. And again, that was one of the big issues that we dealt with that was not a given. I mean, there was neighborhood concern, there were council members who had concerns about it, but we kept our head down and we got that permitted, and they made that investment. Everett Clinic now has been a mainstay in our community for years. Both Providence and Everett Clinic, high quality, low cost service. I mean, they're held up as national examples. And then with Everett Clinic looking at a merger with DaVita, they're going to be able to expand their reach in terms of service. And I'm sort of learning that people of my generation need more and more health care and affordable health care. So it's a welcome addition in our community, and I think will be an important economic factor in our future.
And you talked a little bit about this, but in terms of our economic prospects for 2016, a big part of that is construction activity. I know we had some big companies decide to locate here last year, including our first Fortune 500 firm. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, great year in construction activity. I think 6,500 permits issued in 2015. If that's not a record, it's very close to a record. Danaher spun off. They make instruments, a lot of different instruments, and in this case, Danaher's big national push will be the card chip reading devices that gas stations and retail outlets will be converting to. They make that instrument to do that. So they've located, their Fortune 500 company, they've located and are locating their headquarters here, which is huge. It's our first Fortune 500 company. And I think they're here because they know it's a good business climate, and I'm sure they looked at what happened with the permitting process with Boeing and the tax incentives and said, this is where we want to be. So that's a great example of diversifying our economy and having companies want to locate here. Commercial air service, I think, will see construction start and hopefully operational in 2016. And again, every one of these companies that I talk to say, it would be a much easier decision if we had regional air service here, and that's going to be part of our future.
Well, great. Well, thank you for that update.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about transportation, higher education, and the Streets Initiative. Welcome back to the Mayor's Update. Well, Mayor, before we move on to transportation, I should also mention there's some major projects that a lot of them started construction last year or the year before, and we're going to see them open their doors to residents, business people this coming year. Can you talk about some of those?
Absolutely. The two big developments have to do with waterfront property, and our riverfront property will see construction start and homes and townhomes under construction and for sale before the year is out. That's down at the Simpson site, the old landfill, and the Eclipse Mill site on the Snohomish River. So it's great to see that project coming out of the ground. And then I think in 2016 we'll have some pretty amazing announcements about people and businesses that want to be on that mixed-use site. So that'll be terrific. The port continues to move ahead with Waterfront Place. They're doing really a remarkable job in marketing that. The work that's occurring right now is continuing to build the seawall where scuttlebutts used to be and where the commercial fishing boats were. They're moving boathouses, and that'll be really their first phase of development. So you'll see a hotel, you'll see restaurants, retail there, and from what I understand, getting a lot of interest. And then real close to where you and I work, the Marriott Hotel will scheduled to open mid-year, so that'll be a great addition. I think it'll be highly used by those that go to concerts and events at Xfinity. So some great projects. The Aero Apartments, they're over 50% occupied already. Patella Market apartments, about 50% of those are rented. And then the 60,000 square foot farmers market, I think so far there's a bakery and an Italian restaurant that's scheduled to go in there. So we'll see a lot of activity in 2016.
Well, and of course, all of these projects and this economic activity that we've been seeing, none of it works without transportation.
That's right.
And I know you campaigned very hard last year, and we had some successes with the investments that the legislature put out. Can you talk a little bit about those in terms of regional projects and local projects, and then what's yet to come this year?
So I'll give it some perspective. So the Snohomish County list of transportation projects is about $3 billion. When we went to the legislature, we went with in the governor's budget under $100 million in projects. We said at the very least we needed to be at $1 billion of that $3. Well, you know how this is. These deals are done by committee, but fortunately we got $670 million in projects that will occur over the next several years. The ones of most significance will be improving the freight mobility route from the waterfront. A lot of these are big Boeing parts. So intersections at West Marine View Drive and Pacific, Rucker and Pacific, 41st and Rucker, all will be widened. So there isn't that difficulty of turning radius and having to stop traffic. So that'll be a huge investment for us. The hard running shoulder, which really uses the shoulder of the road, not unlike US 2 eastbound, and at peak hours cars will be able to use that as an additional lane to get out of Everett. And if you see it at night, and it's just horrendous. I mean, it's just hard to believe that in 2008 we invested $250 million to improve I-5 throughout Everett, really from 526 to the Snohomish River. And for a while it was terrific. Now it's congested again, which means the economy is really doing well. So the idea is from the Snohomish River to Marysville to take that shoulder and let that traffic get on that shoulder. So I think it'll ease a lot of that congestion in Everett. There's also an intersection that'll be done at Hardison and the Boeing Freeway, 526, and some other minor projects. But I think we in Everett did well. The county did relatively well. We still are advocating for more money for US 2 planning and engineering westbound in this session. So there's more to be done, but it's a great start. And then, of course, ST3, Sound Transit 3, the planning for that's occurring as we speak. I think we're going to have a preliminary look at what the preferred routes and costs are in this first quarter, so before March. And then by June, that list will have to be finalized. We have been a huge advocate for it's got to go to the job center in and around Boeing. 55,000 workers today, growing to 100,000 by 2035. The original plan didn't have light rail going there. It had just a direct route to Everett. And I believe that with the Sound Transit staff and board now, they get it and they are supportive. But it's one of those issues we're going to have to watch very closely because I, for one, and there are others that feel the same way, if we get a transportation light rail route in SD3 that does not meet our needs, I can't support it in 2016. And so, and I don't believe the ballot measure can pass without Snohomish County support. But I'm hopeful right now that the need is understood and we're going to get that route. And still, Megan, we won't see it until 2035. So I hope I'm around to see it. But it's going to be so important to absorb the kind of growth that we're going to see. I mean, we're 110,000 citizens right now. By 2035, we could be 150,000 plus or minus, another 45,000 jobs. We absolutely cannot absorb that level of growth or job growth without light rail.
And on the local level, I know there's also some projects. Last year we finished up the Broadway Bridge, which was great, finished it ahead of schedule. We've got some other projects. You mentioned the freight mobility, but there's a couple others that people should be aware of in 2016.
Broadway Bridge was really a well-done project. Ryan Sass and his team did a remarkable job in the detour. We finished that project almost 4 months ahead of schedule. So we really did minimize the closure, which was huge, kept within budget, which is huge. This was a combination of federal and state and local dollars to replace a bridge that was over 100 years old and 34,000 cars a day. So we're really happy that that's open once again. We were successful in getting transportation benefit dollars, some $4 million to build and improve Rucker Avenue. If you remember a few years ago, we did most of Hoyt, and we did that through the utility because we had sewer and water that we had to replace. But we'll finish that from Wall Street to Pacific, so that'll finish that pedestrian-like street, and Hoyt's just a beautiful street today. And then we'll move to, with council needs to approve a local match, probably about $1.5 million on a $6-7 million project. But then we'll do Rucker. And so Rucker will be very much like Hoyt. It'll be pedestrian-oriented kind of street. So we'll divert more traffic to West Marine View Drive. Half of the traffic today on Rucker Avenue, people don't even live in Everett, so they're using it as a shortcut, and we're going to have to redirect that traffic. So that's going to be a very important project for us, and I think it's very complementary of what the private sector has done. Arrow Apartments, Patella Market Apartments. I've said all along that, when we see that private sector investment, that's the time when the public needs to step up and make investments as well.
Oh, great. It'll contribute a lot to a walkable downtown core.
It will, yeah.
Well, shifting gears a bit,
Yeah.
and talking about higher education, 2015, again, kind of a milestone year for WSU and Everett with the construction starting on the new University Center. Can you talk a little bit about that and what's ahead for higher education in 2016?
Washington State University has been an incredible partner. I think losing Elson Floyd was a terrible blow to the state and to me personally, but I tell you, I feel his presence very much in all that I see in the Washington State University commitment. The 100,000 square foot building that's under construction that'll open in 2017, the technical degrees that are there today and being added to. We were advocating for agricultural degrees as well for Island, Skagit, and Snohomish County. So we're, as we speak in the legislature, asking for consideration to put more degrees there for ag, which is important. And then one of the last things that Dr. Floyd was successful in doing was getting approval for WSU to do a medical school. And so we're going to see third and fourth year medical students right on our Everett campus, working in our hospitals, working at the Everett Clinic. Those agreements are being developed right now between those institutions. So, and these are the doctors that will come out after graduation and work in rural parts of our state. And rural parts of our state, not just eastern Washington, but clearly spots in western Washington where those doctors in those communities will be important. So it's been everything I hoped it would be.
That's great. And I know Everett Community College is going to be opening some student housing this fall, and that kind of fits into the larger college district planning process that we're going to start.
Right.
So more to come on that.
Yeah, I mean, we just finished our land use comprehensive 10-year update, but Alan Giffen and his team are following up with really developing a more comprehensive college district land use plan out there. And we're trying to look ahead, 10, 20 years to make sure there's property and land for that university center as well as Everett Community College to grow. Great.
Well, finally, as you mentioned, we're spending a lot more time this year looking at quality of life issues, and the Streets Initiative is a big part of that. February is a big month in terms of some of the goals that we've set. Can you talk a little bit about where we're at with the Streets Initiative and our commitment to low barrier housing?
We've talked about it before, probably touched on it with most updates, but it's been 2.5 years now since this issue of people on the street and homeless and some of the things that a lot of citizens have had concerns about have really been addressed by 23 citizens, 67 recommendations. I think really a balance of enforcement that was necessary as well as services. And then we were really fortunate to see the model of Salt Lake City and Lloyd Pendleton and a housing first model, which in about 10 years, the city of Salt Lake put about 1,000 units of low barrier housing. And low barrier housing is really defined as housing that even if you are suffering from substance abuse or you have mental health issues, if you are out and on the street and vulnerable, it's an opportunity to get shelter and housing, and then the whole idea is to get the wraparound services to help these people lead a productive life. So we are on pace to get our first 5 units identified and the first 5 most vulnerable placed probably within 30 days. By mid-year, we'll have 20 people housed, and this will be scattered within the existing housing stock that exists in the community, and then we will be acquiring our first piece of property to start a capital campaign to build probably as many as 60 units in North Everett. So that'll, we're asking for the state's help this year, and we honestly believe that if we're going to transform the lives of those out there who are vulnerable, we've got to have this housing first model work and be successful. But that's not, we're not being Pollyannish about this. We know there are some bad people out there. We know that there are people breaking the law. We know that they're negatively affecting businesses and our citizens. So we have really stepped up enforcement. We have an embedded social worker with our police officers, so if we've got somebody who's at risk and needs help, we can redirect them to that help. But we've made over 100 arrests, primarily drug-related, in the month of December. So, and it's interesting, many of the people that are out there on the street that are peddling drugs and doing illegal activities aren't homeless, but they're preying on the homeless. So we've taken a very tough and very assertive approach with those who are breaking the law, and I think that's what our citizens expect. So I think we've got a good foundation to move forward. We can't expect miracles. This will be an issue that we're working on for years, I think, and but I think we can take some pride and some solace that we're building the right foundation to move forward. And I feel very positive about our ability to do that. And what's nice as well is I finally feel like I can do something about this very challenging issue. And for a long time I felt pretty helpless, and I know our citizens felt pretty helpless too.
Yeah, there's a lot of good work being done, and I know we'll be talking about it throughout the year.
It will be.
Well, thank you, Mayor, for
You're
giving
welcome.
us a look at 2016.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again next month.